Call us, email us, tweet, or Facebook us to join the conversation. We want to hear from you.
Before the break, we asked the question, are churches too serious for their own good? And here's how people voted. 70% said yes, 30% said no. James Martin was a business graduate who worked 6 years in corporate finance before his career took a funny turn. In 1999, he was ordained as a Jesuit priest. Since, he's written or edited some 10 books, including Between Heaven and Mirth, a book about humor and religion. And what's more, Stephen Colbert has named him pastor of the Colbert Report. Father James Martin joins us from New York City. Tell us, James, is God funny?
Well, I think you could say that God has a sense of humor because Jesus had a sense of humor. And theologically, if we equate Jesus with God, and we see Jesus in the Gospels as someone who has a playful sense of humor, who tells clever stories and funny parables, who even gives some of his disciples nicknames, then you could say that God has a sense of humor.
I must not be reading my New Testament the same way you are. Tell me, how is Jesus a jokester?
Well, one of my favorite examples is the Apostle Nathaniel, who when he hears that Jesus is from Nazareth, says, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Now that's a little bit of a dig on the town. It's like saying, "Can anything good come from Toronto?" Right? And Jesus, when he meets the fellow, doesn't reject him and say, "Don't make fun of Nazareth." Jesus says, "Now there is a fellow without guile. There's a guy I can trust." So it's an indication of Jesus's appreciation of a sense of humor. And also, you know, we see Jesus who tells kind of clever stories and funny parables. We don't get it because we're not in first century Palestinian culture, but scholars say that some of the stories that Jesus told, like the man who built his house on sand, for example, would have been seen as funny. We just missed the point, though. But Jesus is telling stories that would have seemed amusing and clever and even funny to his listeners.
Okay, you have found humor in the New Testament with Jesus. What about the Hebrew Scriptures in the Old Testament?
You know, it's funny, most people think of the Old Testament as grim and dour and angry, but one of the most important stories is the story of Abraham and Sarah in Genesis. And Abraham and Sarah are very old. Abraham's 100, Sarah's 99. And three strangers come and tell Abraham that the next time they come, around this year from now, Sarah is going to be pregnant. And Abraham, quote, falls on his face laughing, right? That's a quote. Sarah overhears it. She laughs. God says, "Why did you laugh?" And she says, "I didn't laugh." And God says, "Yes, you did." And she has a son. They name him Isaac. And in Hebrew, Yitzhak, Isaac, means he laughs, right? And Sarah says in this beautiful line, "And all will laugh with me because God has brought laughter into my life." Now that's such an important story because, you know, Abraham and Sarah and Isaac, that's the beginning of Judaism and Christianity, really. And it starts with a laugh. So you could say that both Judaism and Christianity begin with laughter, right? So I think that's a really important story for people to remember and smile about.
You do think humor is a prerequisite for a good spiritual life. Why?
I think humor is a prerequisite for a good emotional life and a good psychological life, which I think themselves are prerequisites for a good spiritual life. You know, I think if you miss out on humor, you miss out on a lot of the joy that God gives us. I think laughter is a gift from God. I mean, can you imagine being at the heavenly banquet in heaven and not smiling, you know, or laughing? Can you imagine being in Jesus' presence after the resurrection and not being joyful? I mean, Jesus says, you know, "I came that my joy may be complete." So the idea that the good news, you know, should make us walking around with, you know, long faces all the time is crazy. We have just gotten this idea of Jesus as always solemn, thanks to our art, mosaic, statuary, you know, paintings. We've gotten the idea of the saints as always serious because of statuary and portraiture. But it's false. We have to look at Jesus as a fully human person with a fully human sense of humor. And we have to look at the saints, you know, as they really were, which is people with great senses of humor. So I think it's really essential. I mean, it's essential. And I think people who are not in touch with that joy, you know, are really missing out on something and really don't get it. I think they're missing the boat, frankly.
You write in your book, Between Heaven and Mirth, that we skip the humor and we go to an intensity of meaning. Tell us how we avoid that.
Well, you know, a lot of the Gospels are focused on the passion, right? The death, the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and that's very important. But that's only a week or two of his life. You know, we're forgetting that in addition to being the man of sorrows, he's the man of joys. He's doing things that are joyful. He's spending time with his friends. He's engaging in table fellowship with outcasts and sinners. They would have been very happy occasions. He's just, you know, when he's working in Nazareth, he's living a very human life with friends and obviously joking. If he's fully human, he's someone who has a fully human sense of humor as well, because that's part of being human. But we tend to focus so much on the passion, the man of sorrows, we forget about the other part of his life. And I think that's, you know, just because of the way the Gospels are constructed. So what I'm trying to do is just balance it out a little bit. So
tell us how humor and holiness fit together.
Well, we see, for example, Jesus as someone with a sense of humor and even a sense of playfulness. So that's our grounding in the Christian life. But even historically, you can see a lot of the saints who had great senses of humor. You have someone like St. Philip Neri, who, when he was walking around Rome, he would go around with half of his beard shaved off to get people to make fun of him and not to take himself so seriously. You have someone like Blessed John the 23rd, who was Pope between 1958 and 1963, who when someone asked him once, how many people work in the Vatican, he said about half of them. Right? So there are all these saints that have great senses of humor. St. Teresa of Avila, right? I mean, they're on and on and on. And you can see how they used it as a way to evangelize, as a way to keep themselves humble, and really just as a way to keep things in perspective and to remember that, that they're just human beings like everybody else. So I think it's a really essential part of the spiritual life.
I don't think I've read a bigger collection of jokes about the clergy than those in your book. I think we dare go there. Share one of those with us.
Well, this is a joke about sisters, where the sisters come out on top. And there are some cloistered sisters who are given some tickets to a baseball game. And so they're very excited. They don't get out very much. And they all line up in the front row of one of the sections. And behind them are these three diehard baseball fans. And there's a single, and all the sisters go crazy. They start jumping up and cheering and everything. And one of the diehard fans is so angry, he says, you know, maybe I'll go to another section where there's only 10 nuns and I can finally see some of this game. So the sisters get all quiet and they kind of, you know, settle down. Then there's a double, and the sisters go nuts. They're waving and they're throwing their popcorn and they're high-fiving. And there's a diehard fan behind them who says, maybe I'll go to the expensive seats. Maybe I can finally see the game. Maybe there's only 5 nuns there. So then there's a grand slam home run. The sisters go nuts. They're doing the wave. They're screaming and shouting. Finally, one of the diehard fans says, you know what, maybe I'll go to the box seats where there's only 2 nuns. Maybe I'll finally be able to see the game. To which the Mother Superior turns around and says to the guy, I have an idea. Why don't you go to hell? There's no nuns there.
Okay, James, you're stretching us. Okay, I do follow you on Twitter. I hope you'll follow me too. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be your follower, and Jesus is too.
James Martin's wonderful book, Between Heaven and Mirth, has just been released on paperback. We've got a limited number of copies available. It's full of his great jokes. Just call the number on your screen for your copy. But now it's time to find out what you think. Is it irreverent to consider religion fun? Yes or no? Please send your answers by phone, email, Facebook, or Twitter. I'd love to know what you think, so be part of the conversation. Our studio audience is taking a live vote, and I'll have those results in a moment. When we come back, responding to deep personal tragedy by turning to stand-up comedy, the remarkable, unlikely story of Jay Martin when context continues.
Lorna, I'm here outside of the Distillery District trying to find out, is God funny? I'm here with Tanya and Christina. All right, guys, I need to know, is God funny?
No, it's not funny. It's very good.
I think he's very old, so I don't think he's funny.
I think he is kind of funny. He's got a sense of humor for sure.
So why isn't God funny?
Who said she wasn't?